If you'd have told me last year what my favourite book of this year was going to be, I do not think I would have believed you. Hi everyone, my name is Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is going to be a favourites video. So if you don't know, I talk about books and theatre on this channel. The theatre favourites video is going to be coming up soon, but we're going to start off today with the bookish edition of this. So I'm going to talk about my 10 favourite books that I have read in the last year, so the year of 2023. I thought it might be harder narrowing down this list, to be honest. There were a couple where like something actually got knocked off of the list at the very last minute because I read one of my favourite books as one of my last reads of the year. But the rest of them, like when I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh no, these are quite solidly cemented. But as I have already hinted at, I really did not expect my favourite book of the year to be what it is. But since I read it, like there was nothing else that was beating it this year, which is ridiculous, but we will get to that soon. We're gonna go in reverse order, obviously. So we're gonna start off with a number 10 book of the year. Let's just dive straight into it. So that book being Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is gonna really shine at the camera. So I bought this book as soon as it came out and then just kept staring at it on my shelves and kept not reading it. I said this exact phrase in a video recently. And it was one that like I was really interested in reading, but for some reason was never in the mood to. And then when I did pick it up, I was like, oh, this is the exact right moment for me to have read this. And I feel like my best way to describe it, and again, I know I spoke about this in a recent video because I did a recent sort of wrap-up video and I said this then, but I said that it's quite a quiet book. You are just following the life of these two main characters and they make games and they sort of come in and out of each other's lives along the way. Things happen, like people grow up and people drift apart, and it's just sort of their life, and it's quite slow and calm, and it's like I was enjoying the writing, I was enjoying everything, but it was just sort of like, okay, I'm not quite sure what the point is. It feels like there needs to be something that sums this up at the end, and then it does sort of build to an event, and I didn't expect what happened to happen, and that did kind of like had the desired reaction. It was the way I described it, is that like because I don't think I was supposed to be expecting it, and I think it was in those moments that I sort of was like, oh no, I am really connected to these characters, and I don't think I realized it until I got to that point. And I think it was like almost in that moment that I gave it a 5 stars. I'm like, oh no, like clearly like you have done your job well of just like telling this quiet story of their life throughout, and then me not realizing how invested in this world I was getting. I say this world, it's very much a contemporary story. I feel like actually I've seen people sort of say that this is something else. It's not, it's very much literary fiction. Said contemporary story just about these people who make video games. I think this cover maybe looks like it's going to be something fantasy. It's not, but I have heard people like think it will be. I just wanted to point that out there. But yeah, this is my number 10 book of the year. In at number 9, we have the first of the Meg recommendations, because of course there is quite a lot of Meg recommendations on this list. She does yell about the books that she likes quite a lot, and we do have like similar taste in quite a lot of areas, so she recommends something, I know I'm probably gonna like it. And I'm really glad I did enjoy this one, because this is a pretty box edition and I didn't want to have to get rid of it, and that is The Whispering Dark by Kelly Andrew. So this one was good for on many different levels for me. One, we had sort of the like dark academia side of things, which I do tend to enjoy in the story. We had a really nice romance. As soon as the two main characters were sort of interacting, I was like, oh, I am here for their interactions with each other. I think that's kind of the main part that I took away from this book, is the romance between the two leads. We also did have some good representation in here. The main character is deaf, and that plays in quite heavily to part of the sort of fantastical element of it as well. And it was just everything about this book like just all came together to give me just the right sort of vibe that I wanted from it. It had sort of like an eeriness to it. It had some really nice prose. It had this beautiful romance in there as well. Just a really good sort of, like I said, everything combined in one book. And I'm really glad that I read it. I'm looking forward to reading more from this author, because she does have a new book out this year. My number 8 book I actually don't have to hold up, because it's actually an arc that I read and it doesn't come out until 2024. So you can look out for this one coming out soon. It comes out, I want to say February or March. It's towards the beginning of the year, and it is An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. S.T. Gibson I previously read A Diary of Blood from. This is set in the same world as that. So A Diary of Blood was a Dracula retelling. This one is loosely based on the book Carmilla, which is something I've never actually read, so I didn't know too much. I know Carmilla has like sapphic vibes to it, and I know it's vampires, and that's about it. that is pretty much what this book is, Sapphic Vampires. It's, again, got like an academic setting to it. The main character goes to a university, and when she gets there, she is part of this poetry class. And there is definitely something weird happening with the teacher and also with the sort of teacher's favourite student, who is Carmilla. And she finds herself sort of drawn more and more into them and their whole deal that is going on. And I really enjoyed it. I really like S.T. Gibson's writing. I was a bit unsure of how her writing was translating to this, because Diary of Blood is told in like letter format, because it's sort of mimicking Dracula, so it's told in the letter format, whereas this one is told more in like regular prose. But I found that sort of the writing style that she had in those letters, and she does have like quite beautiful writing, it's the only way I can describe it, that did translate over to her doing more of like a typical prose novel. I just found myself very, very immersed in this. It's actually the one that ended up on my list in the last few days of the year. I think I finished it on the 29th or the 30th of December, and I was like, this needs to go on my list. So I very much recommend anyone pick it up when it comes out this year. The next book I also don't have to hold, because I borrowed Meg's copy and I actually don't want to go and like disturb her to go and grab it right now, but it is Pyrrha Essay by Susanna Clarke. I again did not expect to love this one quite as much as I did. That is the general theme with books for me, is like, but actually no, some of these in here I'm like, oh no, I knew I was going to love this going in, but this one was something that Meg picked for me to read actually on my TBR game. And it's something that I've been interested in for a while, but when she recommended it to me, she said like she wasn't sure whether I was going to like it or not, because it's weird. And like, weird is not something that puts me off of a book. I like quite a fair amount of weird books, but like weird is like a very broad descriptor, and obviously different people have different tastes. So I think she was more just worried that like it wouldn't be the type of weird that I would like. And I did really, really enjoy it. It's one of those where you kind of don't really know what's happening too much throughout it. You can explain what's happening, but you can't explain sort of the bigger picture of like why things are happening until like things start to slot together later on. But you don't really need to, you just need to be along for the ride. And that's the way I said it, like as I was reading it. I'm like, I can't tell you why all this stuff's happening, but I'm enjoying it happening anyway. And I felt like I just was very connected to the main character. Like from the start, I was like, no, I want to know what happens to this person. And I'm not going to try and give you a synopsis of any of these books, because I'm not very good at giving synopsis. And I think with this one in particular, I wouldn't be able to give you a synopsis of it. But yeah, I think the best thing I can say about this book is that I just felt, like I said, instantly connected to the character and instantly just wanting to know more about the world. And you were given more information about the world, but you were given it slowly, and it gave you time to sort of just enjoy it as you were sort of slowly being given this information, if that makes any sense at all. My number 6 book is, again, one that I was like tentatively hoping that I would really like. I actually picked it for Lisa and Jem's podcast, and it was another one where I sort of had it as a recommendation, well, not necessarily a personal recommendation, but it was from a YouTube video where it was sort of described as a weird book. And from what I heard of it, it sounded like the sort of weird that I would like, but would it be? I wouldn't know until I read it. And luckily it really, really was. And that is The Paulbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. So this is about a main character called Art, and he's telling his story. Essentially, it starts off with him in high school. He has something called the Paulbearers Club, where they go and like attend people's funerals for people who don't have like friends and family to attend the funerals. And it's sort of like a thing to get college credit so you can get into college. And it starts off with that, and he meets this girl there called Mercy while he is in the Paulbearers Club. And then it sort of tells the story of their life throughout a prolonged period of time. And again, it's one of those where they sort of come in and out of each other's lives throughout. But what happens with this one is that the Art is telling the story, and he's sort of telling it a bit removed from it. So a lot of it is, well, looking back, this was the first sign of this. And you're like, first sign of what? And it's clear throughout it that he thinks that there is something going on with Mercy. But what you also get in this is that Mercy has found this manuscript and is reading through it and is annotating it. So as you're reading the book, you get little bits where Mercy sort of interjects her own writing throughout it, and at times just does like full pages after a chapter and is like, no, I can't be quiet here, I need to correct things. So there are little, like I said, interjections all the way throughout. And she very much disagrees with a lot of the stuff that Art clearly thinks is happening with her. And it leaves you very much questioning who is right. Like, especially the ending in particular, I'm like, I still don't know who I believe in this. And if you ask me any day, it could change who I believe. And I really want to reread it now I sort of know where it's heading up to, and see if I can figure out more clues as to who is in the right. I don't think you're supposed to know. I think you're supposed to sort of make up your own mind. I think it's supposed to be very open. But it was just, but it was just such an interesting way of telling the story. and like at least one of these people is an unreliable narrator, maybe both of them, and I can't tell you which. And normally something like that would bug me, but it actually just made me really appreciate it. I'm like, oh, this is so well done, and I'm so glad that I read it. Okay, we are into my top 5. I'm going to give you actually a little bit of a idea of what we got in my top 5. So we have got 2 authors that I've read from before. I think both of them are featured in favourites list previously, and then we have 3 authors that are new to me. So that's just to give you like a little bit of a guessing game. Actually, I'll say it now before I get into the top 5. Can any of you guess what my number 1 book of the year is going to be? Leave your guesses down below. Do not cheat and put it after you finish watching the video, but guess down below what you think my favourite book is, and we will go into the top 5. My number 5 is one of the books by someone that I've read from before, and what I find funny with this author is that their writing style changes quite drastically. They write quite a lot of different types of books, and there are some that I have absolutely adored, like this one. There are some that I really did not like and ended up like DNFing the series because of, and then there are some that are just nice and in between. And there is definitely a style of writing that they do that I prefer to all the others. And luckily this year was one of the years that we got one of those books. And actually 2024 is going to be one of those years as well. So I'm very much looking forward to the next release. But the release they had this year was In the Lives of Puppets. The author is TJ Klune. So as I said, I very much like this style of writing from TJ Klune. So things like House in the Cerulean Sea, Under the Whispering Door, they have both been on favourites list before. I actually read both of those in the same year, I think. I should say actually I have a rule of like only 1 book from each author on the list. It doesn't matter for this one, but it does matter for one of the authors later on. But this is sort of the sweet spot for TJ Klune's writing style for me. It's these fantasies I'm not going to call cozy fantasies, they're not quite there, but they're not like the super high stakes fantasies either. There's something quite whimsical about them. When the praise on the back of them says like a modern fairy tale, the warm hug of a book, and then oh yeah, a whimsical warm-hearted fantasy is definitely that sort of, like I said, not necessarily like completely cozy fantasy, like there is definitely still stakes in them, but the type of cozy fantasy that I enjoy is probably the way to describe this. So this one is inspired by the Adventures of Pinocchio. It is, but instead of puppets, it's robots. And you've got a cast of characters led by a human named Victor, and then you've got loads of sort of android friends, including like a Roomba, like the vacuum robot, but it's called Rambo. And then they come across an unfamiliar robot called Hap, and there is sort of more to Hap's backstory than you originally think, and it's figuring out how Hap maybe like connects to other people in Victor's life other times. And I'm not going to say much more than that, but I really enjoyed this book. I really like TJ Klune's writing style. Like I said, when it's this particular style, I don't always love his other works. I liked like his superhero YA series. I didn't love the Wolf Song, I can't remember what the Green Creek series, I didn't love that one, but when he's done this sort of book, it's not disappointed me yet, and I can't wait for the sequel to House in the Cerulean Sea that we've got coming out this year. Although I am a bit worried about that one, because like, do we need a sequel? But also like, I want a sequel. It's a strange thing. But yeah, this is my number 5 book this year, In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. So when I said that we can only have 1 book by each author on this list, that was very much relating to this next author, because I read, how many books? They're behind me, I can probably count them. 1, 2, 3. I read 4 books by this author this year. I read all of their adult romances, and I started with the first one that they had published, and I worked my way up to their latest one that was published this year. And I do think, while I love all of them, their writing just got better and better as I read each of them. And part of me did want to put their most recent release on this list, because like objectively that is probably the best book that this author has written, but there is something about this book that I just loved so much, and that book is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. So like I said, I read Beach Read earlier on this year, and then read People We Meet on Vacation or You and Me on Vacation. I always forget which one's the UK title, which one's the US title, but I just checked because this is Meg's copy, because I do prefer the US cover for this one. But for us it's You and Me on Vacation, which makes more sense because they do not actually meet on vacation. But anyway, then we had Book Lovers, and then we had Happy Place. And I did really enjoy Happy Place, and like I said, objectively probably is her best book, but there was something about this one that I just really loved. It's a romance, and I loved both of our leads, which is obviously very important when you have a romance. Like, you want to feel connected to both your main character and your love interest. I did love them both. I loved that this was sort of like the like Hallmark type romance where they went to like a small town and fell in love, but then they were both very, very much city people who were like, no, we just want to get back to the city now, please. You get in Hallmark films, you always get the people, it's like, oh yeah, living in a city is so terrible and I just want to give everything up and move to a small town. And these people are like, no, we enjoy living in a city. Good, because I do as well. So I'm glad that it wasn't just like, oh no, like this life is absolute hell. It happens way too much in romances, mainly in like the films, but like it just does. It's a trope I don't enjoy too much. So this turned it on its head and I loved that. And also, you know, like it's a book about the publishing industry. Actually that sort of thing of like people working in the book industry happens a lot in Emily Henry books. It also happens with another romance author that I'm going to talk about soon. And that is something that I just tend to enjoy. I tend to like books about books. So this one obviously definitely fell into that. I really, really enjoyed this. I'm so glad that I've read all of Emily Henry's books this year. Yes, this is another Meg recommendation. She put Beach Read on my TBR in my game earlier on this year. And it meant that I then immediately was like, yeah, I'm reading all of the others, which is good because I've had like the first 3 sat on my shelf for a while now. I don't own Happy Place yet. I'm waiting for the paperback to come out, but I'm really glad that I have read those and I'm so excited for Funny Story coming out this year. I keep saying next year, it's not, it's this year. It's 2024, we're in 2024, I need to get that into my head. Of the rest of the books that are still to come, I feel like I need to point out all the Meg recommendations in this video just so she can feel adequately smug about it. Obviously, like I said, the last one was, I've got 4 more books to talk about. All of these are books that Meg has read and rated highly. 2 of them she has personally recommended to me. One of them actually she was more influenced by me in reading it, so I'm glad about that one. And the other one I will explain when I get to. That maybe is giving away what book that is. But yeah, just so she can feel adequately smug. This next one is actually the first book I read this year. And I did read it after she read it and loved it so much. And I'm so glad I did because it's now my number 4 book of the year and it is The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Mannon. So this is like a fantasy rom-com. It is basically You've Got Mail but fantasy. And like it's not, again, like not so much a cozy fantasy in the way that like there are no stakes whatsoever. There is like some pretty big things that happen in this, particularly to do with one of our main characters. And the drama is still there, but also like that's not kind of the focal point. Like the focal point is this rom-com aspect between the 2 main characters, and like I said, it's a You've Got Mail thing where they're sending letters back and forth and they don't know that it's each other, and I love that trope. Like I do like films that have that sort of element to them as well, and I'm so glad that I read this year. Like it's a BookBox book that like I knew I wanted to read, but I'm really bad with not picking up the BookBox books, so I wasn't sure if I actually would get around to reading it, and I did. I read it as my first book and it was a 5-star read and it's ended up on my favourites. That is like such a good sort of journey for that. But like I love that my first book was something that's like, yes, this is a favourite, and it's just something that I've loved an entire year now, which makes me think that like I'm due a reread of it. Also because there is like a companion to this coming out this year, so maybe I should reread it just to like remind me, because I don't know what happens in this. I do remember what happened in this, but like I can reread it. I'm gonna reread it. Moving on. So we have our last Meg recommendation coming up now. My top 3 books, actually I should say, were all very, very close to each other. Like they're all quite close to each other in the list, but I'd say that if I was sort of like breaking it down, like 10 to 6 could have all been like moved around in a different order, and then 6 to 4 could have been moved around in a different order, but my top 3 are all very much my top 3, but again could have been moved around. But one of them has just stuck in my brain all year and refused to leave. I say all year, since I read it, one of them has just stuck in my brain and refused to leave. So it had to be number 1. Again, just giving you a hint of what it is. And the other hint is that I said that there are sort of, after Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, I said that there were 2 sort of Meg related books still to come. This is the last Meg recommendation, which I think is giving you a hint as to what number 1 is. But we'll talk about these ones first. So my number 3 book of the year is one that I read towards the end of November, so a more recent one. And I'm really glad actually that I took a while to read it, because it means that I get to read the sequel with a lot smaller gap than a lot of other people have, which is good because like where this book ends. Anyway, this book is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I actually read 3 Rebecca Ross books this year. I read this one and then I read, well actually no, I read the other ones and then I read this, but I read A River Enchanted and A Fire Endless, the duology. I read both of them, and then I've read this one, and I will be reading Ruthless Vows soon. It should hopefully be on the way to me in the next couple of days. But this one like, the story of it sounded good, but I knew that I wanted to read A River Enchanted because it had been on my shelves for a while, so I knew I wanted to read that before I got around to reading this. And I actually didn't own it, so it like wasn't staring at me, so it was fine. And then I read A River Enchanted and I was like, I really like her writing style. I'm gonna have to put like this one on my wish list. And then someone bought it me for my birthday, which I was very happy about, because then I like immediately picked it up. It's not like there wasn't a copy in the house. There was already Meg's copy in the house, but it was a pretty Fairy Loot one and I didn't want to touch it. So as soon as I had my own copy, I'm like, yes, thank you, this is mine now. And I adored this so much. I love the romance between Roman and Iris. There's a trope of letters and people not knowing who's sending the letters. I told you it's something that I like in books and in films. There's also like just Rebecca Ross's writing style is really, really beautiful. It's a fantasy, but it's like a quiet fantasy in a way where there is this sort of like fantastical war that is happening in the background, but it's like slowly, quietly building. Like obviously it affects their life quite a lot, but it's not the focal point of the book until it has to be. And I think the balance of it worked really well. I just really, really love this book. I could not put it down when I was reading it, and I'm so excited to read the sequel. I'm also terrified to read the sequel, but like, having seen her wrap up a duology before, I actually preferred the second book in the River Enchanted duology. So I'm hoping that she can pull it out of the bag again. And Rufus Vows is hopefully going to be very, very good and really needs to get to my house soon. Every time the door goes, I'm like, is it my book? Can I have it now, please? And that is why this is my number 3 book of the year. So we have reached our top 2, and these are 2 completely different vibes of books. One of them is a book that, like, if I was thinking in terms of enjoyment, this should be my number 1. Hands down, it should be my number 1 book of the year. But like I said, my number 1 book is just stuck in my head. So we'll talk about my most enjoyed book of the year, which was actually my number 2 read of the year. And that is A 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I love this book so much. So this is, she moves into a flat, and then when she gets there, there's somebody else already in her kitchen, and then she finds, and which you know is a shock, and then she finds out that this is actually a person who lived in the flat 7 years ago, because this flat just randomly travels in time 7 years every so often. And like, you know, again, a bit of a shock, but she gets over it. She starts like a bit of a relationship with this guy. Like, she only sees him every so often, but like, you know, romance is ensuing. But then obviously, like, he's out there in the world somewhere in the modern time, so we're going to interact with him then as well at some point. And I just love it. I love it so much. It's such a good book. It also like deals with some heavier stuff as well. Like, there's a lot of talk on grief. Both of Ashley Poston's romances kind of have that built into them, and I do appreciate that like we have sort of the fun romance, but then we have a little bit something else going on as well, because like, you know, people are multifaceted. Like, no one's going to be all happy all the time, so it's nice to like have a bit of balance in there. I will say I prefer this one to The Dead Romantics because I think it has a bit more of the light-hearted side to it. Like, the romance in this is so good. I love it so much. This is another one I need to reread. I was looking at the audiobook today and I'm like, do I just start the audiobook of this again? And you know what, maybe I do. Maybe now I've talked about it, I do. She also has another book coming out this year, and I'm so excited for it because I love, like, this is 2 Ashley Poston adult romances that have made my top 10 list in 2 years now. And I would be very shocked if A Novel Love Story, which is her new one, isn't on my top 10 this year. Like, if it's not, then I'm going to be so sad. But this is so good. Read The 7 Year Slip, everyone. It's so good. So, after me just being really happy talking about a book, well, my number 1 book, hopefully you've already guessed down below. I seem so like intimidated to talk about it, and as soon as I hold it up you will know why. Because like I said, we've had many Meg recommendations on this list. This is not a Meg recommendation. I feel like I need to say that multiple times because she said that she will never recommend this book to anyone, but also she gave it 5 stars. It's a very well written book. She just refuses to recommend it to people, which is also very much how I am talking about this, because like, I'm going to tell you this is the best book I read this year. I am not recommending it to a single one of you. If you want to read it, that's on you. That is completely on you. Look up the trigger warnings. Do what you need to do. I am not recommending anyone puts themselves through this, but also it is the best thing I've read all year, and that is A Little Life by Yanagihara. Like, where do I even start with this book? Just poor Jude. Like, he goes through so much. It's a story of these 4 friends from college, particularly one of them is Jude St. Francis, and it's just sort of the story of their lives, and Jude goes through so much. Like I said, if you want to read this, look up the content warnings, because And it's just like, just when you think that like he can't possibly go through something else happens. Just when there is a moment of happiness, something else has to happen. And I understand why people like just say like it's just trauma porn. Like it is. It 100% feels like it is. But also like it's so well written. It's so well done. Like I felt for this character so much. It didn't feel like, it felt like he was a very real person. Like it's sometimes when people just go through like one thing after another, you're like, this feels too unrealistic. But it felt so real and so just like well done. That is the only way I can say it. It is one of the best crafted books that I have ever read. And it is the best thing that I've read this year. But also I did not enjoy reading it. And I do not recommend it to anyone. And this is such a weird place to end this video. But like, it couldn't be anything else. I finished this book, and although like I felt numb at the end of it, I went to see the play shortly afterwards. Like when I say shortly afterwards, I mean like 2 hours after. Like I left the house like an hour after I finished reading the book. And the play really cemented it in my mind as well, because like obviously being able to then see it on stage. Like I didn't cry when I read the book, but I cried when I saw the show. And then I went to see the play a week later because we won the ticket lottery. So I wasn't expecting to see the play at all. That's the thing, I only read this book this year. I had it, but I only read it this year because I was going to see the play and I wanted to read the book before I saw the play. And I wasn't actually supposed to see the play. I ended up taking someone's ticket because they couldn't get to see the show. So it was all like just a coincidence that I actually read it this year. And then we won the ticket lottery, so we saw it again a week later. So everything just kind of came at once with this book. And it was in that week in between the two performances where I was like already thinking, oh, I actually want to reread that. And I shouldn't want to put myself through it again. But it's just played on my mind the entire year. Since, like, again, I say the entire year, it was like May that I read it. But it's stuck with me since. And I do think I will reread it in 2024. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, but I'm gonna do it. So, that's a really weird place to end this video. I'm well aware of that fact. But like I said, it couldn't be anything else. Like my #1 book of the year could not have been anything else. But luckily there were a lot of happier ones in that list. So we're just gonna leave it there. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know what your favourite book is that you read this year. And I will see you guys soon with a new video. Bye.